get to this intensity before we go too much further.
Right.
Because I think this is important, and maybe my thinking's wrong, but if your intensity is not to a certain threshold or past a certain threshold, I don't think it really matters if you're doing high volume, low volume.
Right.
I don't think it matters at all.
Right. Right.
Or at least not very much.
Right.
Because if essentially, and again, intensity is basically just your effort level, how
Right.
hard you're actually pushing your body.
Right.
I'll say this and I'll let you have it.
Sure.
I remember listening to I think he's a professional competitor, and he said he always has people come up to him and they show him these workout plans. They bring them to him. Mm-hmm. They print them off from the internet, or they come up with them themselves, or whatever. But they always bring them and they say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And he'll read it and look through it, and he goes, "Well, I don't know. I mean, it looks fine, I guess." But he goes, "It's not what's on the paper; it's how it's executed."
Yeah, absolutely.
So basically, he's saying it's how hard are you working when you're doing this stuff, because it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
You could have the best workout potentially scientifically based,
right?
But if you're not working hard or doing what you're supposed to do, then it's pointless. It's no better than the worst workout ever. You know what I mean?
Right. Sure.
So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you say that, because I've actually been in arguments with people over the definition of intensity. I went into school already, back in the day, somebody that was in bodybuilding and trying to be a bodybuilder, and my definition of intensity is exactly what your definition of intensity is. But then I get into school with people that don't necessarily know that. They don't know that lifestyle, you know what I mean? And they use the term for intensity that we learn in school, which is amount of weight. The higher the intensity, the more the weight, which I challenge you to try less hard when you increase your weight, right? Mm-hmm. So the intensity does grow. A byproduct of that is making the weight higher, but they don't take into consideration variables to make it.
That is one. That's the most straightforward method to increase intensity, is to increase weight for the same amount of repetitions.
Exactly.
But you could reduce weight and do more repetitions, but potentially have a higher intensity level.
Exactly.
Than,
or supersets or drop sets or X reps or whatever, make it more intense.
But if you're not really, I guess what you're saying is, if you're not familiar with training yourself and have experimented with this over probably years, then you may not really have any.
There's your tool bag's empty.
Yeah.
You can't go to it for a lot of stuff, right? So, and so that's the thing is I agree. Schwarzenegger has a quote in Pumping Iron, and I don't remember exactly what it is, so I'm not even paraphrasing. I'm just going to give you the gist of it. It's just something along the lines of, where if I had your physique, I would win. And I'm sure Dorian Yates probably has a quote like that too, because these guys are great champions. They have the mindset. They know how to train their body. They know the way to up their intensity. And given a workout, given a certain person's set of genetics, they would probably still win because of how they did it. And that's the key. Is okay. So when we grow a muscle, you have satellite cells, which for muscles are called satellite cells. For everybody else, around the body and the organs and things, are called stem cells. And if you train your body to a point where it is so intense that it needs to adapt to the stimuli, which is it needs to adapt to the workout you're giving it, and if the protocol is for growth, right? So the stimulation would be to growth. Those satellite cells actually go into the muscle bellies, and they go in there and they create new muscle nuclei, because they say, well, listen, we got to grow, we got to expand. And so when those nuclei go in there, it actually separates and opens those fibers, pushing them farther apart, which that's how the muscles into growth. So you want to really you want to push those satellite cells into the muscle. It's a long, crazy process, but long story short, that's how they get bigger. And so how do we do that? With intensity. And we utilize the tools that we just talked about for intensity. And so it's probably one of the, obviously you need the nutrition to support the growth. But intensity, the way you train, is one of the most important aspects of growing muscle.
Well, that's kind of what, when I was reading through this, and this is a very in-depth book.
Yeah, it's like a textbook.
It is a textbook, and I'm sure you have a lot. Obviously with your background, you have books probably 4 times this size with a lot more detail than even this. But, I was kind of getting the feeling reading through this, and I haven't read it cover to cover, and even half the stuff I do read, I'm not going to understand anyway, unless I did more, unless I was in your shoes or something like that.
Sure.
But I was kind of getting that feeling like they were missing the point of intensity in the book a little bit.
Yeah.
Like they're almost downplaying it a little bit. Like I'm like, they're basically saying volume and this and that, and I'm like, well, none of this really matters if when you're doing all these test subjects and get all these groups of people, if these people know how to train hard, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say what results you're getting because I know from training people, for example, that I get one client and they just either know how to train hard or they don't.
Right.
It's like you can't teach it to them.
Right.
It's a weird thing, but you can't. It's like this. I try to explain to people. I say, hey, I want you on this set to go all out. I was like, what's that mean? It means, well, go until you can't do another rep and then do another one, basically.
Yeah.
Well, some people you get in there and they just, you can just tell. They did that. They had nothing left on that set. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And other people, it's like, okay, you racked the weight, but I know you had 2 or 3 or 4 more in
Right,
you. Not
right.
even one more, like multiple reps left, but they think they're done.
Right.
Mentally or whatever. I just say,
Or they hit their number, 10 or 12, you know.
And I say, well, basically it's like those kind of people that train like that, I'm like, the only way I could maybe get them to do a set at 100% effort, 100% intensity would be put a gun to their head and say, if you don't get the number of reps that I think that is failure for you, then we're going to shoot you.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the only way to. I don't know if that would work. I
Right.
think they'd probably end up shot because
Yeah.
they just can't mentally or emotionally invest that much. They can't go through that pain barrier or
Right,
whatever.
yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah,
And so
oh,
I don't know how
absolutely.
these studies are affected just by, well, who did you find to do it? Mm-hmm. Were they competitive? And it does detail in a lot of these
Sure.
cases, but a lot of cases it's just 8 untrained women came and did a study.
Right, yeah. And it's hard.
Yeah,
It's hard because
well,
the more
you
trained
know.
you are, the more you can handle.
Not to say that women don't know how to train. I'm just,
No.
I'm just giving an example. There were
Right.
trained men, untrained men.
Yeah.
There was all sorts of stuff they did on these studies, but
You know,
test groups or whatever.
and it's hard to determine. I think if you've not been there before, and there's nothing that's going to tell you. No textbook is going to tell you how it feels to reach that point. And I think if just kind of a check down, if you have to take your head down to your hand to answer your phone, that muscle's done working. You don't need to do anymore. If you get done doing a leg workout or a set of leg exercises or something, and you're walking around like a baby deer, baby deer legs, and you're afraid your knees are going to lock up on you, your legs are probably done. I mean, there's things that you can little barometers that you can tell. Obviously without having to, go to the point to where if you go down into the hole on a squat, you can't come back out of it and somebody has to save you. But you can work it to a point where you've got physical, manifestations that tell you that muscle has reached failure. And I think that's the intensity that you need at that point in time for muscle growth. Because again, everything boils down to providing a stimulus to adapt to. 100%. It doesn't matter whether it's a diet. It doesn't matter whether it's, cardio for your lungs and heart. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to put on muscle. You have to provide a stimulus that your body has to get to and then overcome. Which I think, again, intensity level, the way we define it with that. I tried to explain X reps to somebody at school one time also, and it was a concept that was so foreign that so X reps are basically just cutting reps in half. So if you get to 10 reps and you can't do any more reps, you do half reps, and then you do as many half reps as you can until you can't do any more, and then you cut those into half. So you're doing quarter reps, and then you do it until you can't move the weight. And I do recommend doing this with machines more than free weights, but anyways, point is that when it came to explaining that to somebody that had no experience with bodybuilding, and it was just a scholastic style learning situation, it all felt back to the principles of hypertrophy and stuff.
I just wanted to show you that there in the book because I think if you want to read that maybe for the audience, this deals with the volume again,
Sure.
what we're kind of talking about.
So it says multi-set protocols favoring high volumes of resistance training optimize the hypertrophic response. To avoid overtraining, people should increase volume progressively over the course of a training cycle and integrate periods of reduced training volume on a regular basis to facilitate the recovery process. Yeah, that's what we do.
Right, and so, I mean, a lot of the stuff in the book I read, and I'm like, yeah, that's essentially in a roundabout way things that like you and I have already kind of figured out. So, for example, what I kind of take by this is, we've kind of found out that when you train to build muscle you have certain periods of time that you can kind of train harder
Yeah.
and maybe more volume, or or you're putting your body under more stress, but it can only be for a certain period of time, and then you need to back off.
Yeah.
So maybe 4 to 6 weeks. It seems like that's about right. Like where you're really,
Yeah.
pushing on the gas.
Yeah,
Like we're going
sure.
to train as hard as we can, leave nothing in the tank.
Yeah.
And then after 4 to 6 weeks, if you keep doing that, it's like your body starts rejecting
breaking
it
down,
almost.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It either physically starts breaking down, or you just can't recover from it. So you need a period of time, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks again, where you just kind of train at a moderate.
Yeah.
It says here like reduce your volume,
Yeah.
do something.
Well,
And so yeah, I mean we have found that just
Yeah.
through our own training over the years. Not because we read it in a book, but we kind of just stumbled across this
Yeah.
on our own. And then it's kind of validating
Yeah.
what we've already, so there is things in here that are like, yeah, I think that's right because we've done that.
experience. Well, and that's the thing is also when we do that, you start noticing like you're sore for longer, you're stiffer for longer, maybe even a couple of nicks and bumps and boo boos here and there along, little twinges here and there along the way. You start noticing those start to kind of maybe amp up in frequency, but also your mentality. You start not wanting to train or dreading training, or even being intimidated by training.
Well, and that was the thing. They had a term in here, overtraining,
Yeah.
which you really have to clarify that before you can. But yeah, when you start overtraining, which I haven't read about in the book here specifically, but I know they talk about it somewhere. There are signs, just like you're saying. People ask you that. How do you know if you're overtraining? Well, whether it's overtraining or under recovery or however you want to look at it, basically there are signs,
Sure.
and it's an emotional thing. But I've noticed a lot of other things that I thought were not tied to overtraining, but I don't know really how to explain it. But you just kind of know.
Right. Yeah. You do. It's a feeling you get, and if you've been again lethargic, maybe even start putting on some weight, start eating, getting ravenously hungry. Because what happens is, as we talk about your body kind of like slowing down and ramping down because it's being beat up so bad, your body starts eating more and being hungry more to try to compensate for that repair, which is still not going to happen, and then we end up putting on a little bit of weight during that too. So that's another reason to kind of ramp things down. I was going to say, with that mindset, and this might be a good segue. Even on top of maybe lowering the volume, but even if you keep the volume similar, even changing some of your order of operations, like not doing heavy bench press or squat first in line every workout, every chest workout. Maybe starting out with some cable crossovers, and maybe not even doing dumbbell bench for a couple weeks, and relying on maybe a machine press or a dumbbell press, little things like that. Because that's a big compound movement. And so is a machine press, but it's a different. You're not incorporating the stabilizers, and you're not incorporating as many movements or as many muscles as you are with like a big heavy bench press.
So you might be wondering, we're blabbing on and on and on about who knows what. 'Cause we don't even really know what.
We're just.
How does this apply though? I wanted to give somebody an example.
Yes.
Since I've been kind of just because I'm reading my book here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn something.
I love it.
So what I'm going to do myself in my own workout routine.
Yes.
I don't have it all figured out yet, and it's not going to change dramatically from how I train now. I mean, you already know that. I'm not going to go and do something completely different. But
yeah.
I'm basically going to go for a while. I'm going to go like one workout, say for back. I'm going to go a little bit higher volume, one workout, and the next time I work back,
A little bit lower volume.
I'm going to go a little bit lower volume.
So what are we doing? Do you know the parameters of your volume?
Well, typically when I train, I'm doing like 1 or 2 sets to basically to failure on a particular exercise. I'm going to do like 3 or 4. I'm going to double my working set volume.
On top of your warm-up sets.
On top of my warm-up.
Yes.
Well, I don't count really. So when I get to the point where I'm like, okay, this is a working set, might be set 3 in a particular exercise, I'm going to, instead of just doing 1 of those or maybe 2, I'm going to do like 3 or 4.
Okay, wow.
And I may move my reps up a little bit as well. So instead of doing 6 to 8 on a particular body, maybe I'll go 10 or 12.
Okay.
But then the next workout or whatever, and I'm also going to increase my rep speed a little bit to try to activate the type 2 a little more.
Sure.
So a little faster rep speed on the positive.
Yeah. And they say those are the ones that pop. The ones
and then on my other workout where I'm going to go a little bit maybe a little bit more controlled, a little bit slower on the positive, maybe a little bit heavier lower rep range,
more time under tension.
more time under. So I'm just going to play around a little bit and just kind of alternate workouts for particular body parts for a while, just to see if I can get a little something, because normally when I train